All right, there we are. We are live. Greetings, folks. This is Victor Coronado, and this is Nuestra America. Nuestra America is back, and we're very excited about bringing the weekly program back. This is going to be a weekly program about every news, Latin American news and politics. And this is going to be brought to you by both Anticonquista and Orinoco Tribune. And so I just want to say on air, I've said this privately, but I'll say on air that we folks over at Anticonquista are extremely excited about this, collaborating with Orinoco Tribune, and
Me
also
too.
very, we feel a certain sense of gratitude. So thank you to Orinoco Tribune. My name is
Thank
Victor
you.
Coronado, and our two panelists, if you will, are Natalia Orban. Natalia is an independent journalist, and we also have Jesus Rodriguez Espinosa from Orinoco Tribune. So thank you both and welcome.
Thank you for inviting us and for praising us. We are the
Thank
ones
you,
honored here.
Victor. Hello, Jesus. Hello,
Hi,
Victor. Boa
Natalia.
noite. It's great to be here
It-
tonight.
It's an honor to talk to you also.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so let's get right into it. So we have a lot of we have a full agenda here. We're going to try to get a lot in 1 hour. We don't get to it this week. We'll get to it hopefully next week. There's just so much going on in Latin America. Um, but let's talk about this idea of a new Cold War in Latin America. And I want to start off actually with there was a piece that Carlos Cruz Mosquera, who's an Anticonquista editor, wrote, and it was perfect timing. He wrote it. It was published in Jacobin magazine, and the title is literally in Latin America, the U.S. wants a Cold War redux. I believe it came out. I don't have the date in front of me, but I believe it came out on February 20th. And so it just starts off by saying, with Cold War divisions once again rising to the fore, the U.S. is returning to its old ways in Latin America, trying to exert influence in its backyard to enlist the region in the ongoing project of U.S. global domination. As the United States continues to escalate diplomatic and military pressure on Russia and China for supposed foreign meddling worldwide, evidence from Latin America exposes their double standard. Historically perceived by the United States as their backyard or their front yard, quote unquote, as Joe Biden has more recently suggested, Latin America is now a chess piece in the new Cold War. And I believe he wrote this right before what Russian President Vladimir Putin is calling a special operation in Ukraine, and then that happened. So, can you both please speak to this issue or this idea of a new Cold War in Latin America?
Do you want me to go ahead, Natalia, or do you want to say something
Yeah,
first?
go on.
Okay, okay. For us, it's evident that the Cold War scenario is part of the debate. If you ask me, it's part of the framework in which what is happening right now in Ukraine evolves. So, first of all, I mean, I always, when I see the situation in Ukraine, for me, it's very similar to the missile crisis that happened between Cuba, the Soviet Union, and the US in the 60s. And in that time, the gringos decided they were about to begin a nuclear war just because the Soviets put missiles in Cuba. So a lot of people forget about that, but that's like almost the same thing that is happening right now in Ukraine, but in vice versa. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like NATO and the US are encircling and putting a lot of heavy weapons in Ukraine or near Ukraine, near the Russian border, and they expect the Russians to do nothing. So that's just to begin to talk about the whole, uh, Cold War thing. And of course, they also, at least for Orinoco Tribune, we believe that they are also trying to, in a scenario of worsening of the Ukrainian conflict, they might be wanting to open small skirmishes or destabilization processes in Latin America or in Asia, using Taiwan and China, and in Latin America using Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela. So that's part of the debate. I don't know what you think about that, Natalia.
I think I'm seeing like with the latest facts, mainly being the trip that Ivan Duque had to Washington last week, that was extremely eye-opening when Ivan Duque going against all the countries in Latin America, including countries that have like governments that are conservatives, or there are governments that are not like left-centric governments. He said that Colombia will be following United States demands of like sanctioning Russia, and also that Colombia will be granted a new status with NATO as a partner, a special partner outside NATO, even though like Colombia is already a global partner of NATO, the only one in Latin America, but they are giving them more powers. They are putting them even more inside and within the NATO age and the agenda. And I think that when we look the whole picture, of course, me as a Brazilian, I'm extremely concerned, because I'm seeing that this is not just about like a regional destabilization of Latin America per se, but this is also something that is against the whole global South, because I believe they are using what's going on in the moment to actually attack BRICS. Because if you see, they are attacking Russia, of course, with everything going on in Ukraine. They are going towards
Can you
China.
very quickly, can you explain what BRICS is to the audience?
BRICS as international cooperation of economical cooperation, political cooperation of countries, of several what they say like emergent countries, like big economies from the global South, plus Russia, of course. But it's composed by Brazil, being the B, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And because BRICS was actually posing a threat to the northern market, especially the European and the United States market, it has always been a target. This is coming from the Trump administration, with like Mike Pompeo bragging about that one of the main goals that he had during Trump's administration was to cripple BRICS. We had, of course, with their whole agenda of trying to destroy the Belt and Road Initiative, which is something that the United States is particularly concerned, and they try to undermine this through the meeting, the last G7 meeting that they had here in the UK. They have been doing movements against the BRICS in general, and Brazil being on BRICS, Brazil is a large player of economical and political players, so many is centered in Brazil on when we are talking especially about South America, politically speaking, economically speaking. And this is why when we had Bolsonaro and the coup in Brazil, the whole continent started to fall apart, because Brazil like brought a lot of the trash to the surface. And now with the possibility of having Lula back, who is someone that is extremely pro a multipolar world, who is someone that has been trying to negotiate with the global South, not just with Latin America, but also with Africa and Asia. This is something that will raise the alarms with the North, because we know that the West is going through a period of the downfall of the capitalism. And when the crisis comes, we will be the first to feel that crisis. That's why we are seeing now the countries threatening other countries that are not being on their same agenda of attacking and like hostilize Russia, even though they don't have like a particular political or especially economical reason to do so. And countries are paying a high price if they trying to abstain. And that desperation is showing, and it's coming from the West. This is not coming from Russia. And one example that I like to give is what is going on in Bangladesh, that Lithuania canceled a donation of vaccines to Bangladesh because they have abstained in the UN voting to sanction Russia. They did not vote against the motion. They did not support Russia. They just decided to abstain, and they will pay the price. The price being the wealth and health and well-being of their citizens.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I just want to add to that, going back to this, to the discussion about the Cold War thing, that I mean, there are facts indicating that there's something of this scenario trying to be developed in Venezuela. It changed somehow with this unexpected approach from the U.S. towards Venezuela in recent days. But before that, days before that, hours before that, that meeting in Caracas between Maduro's government and the U.S. delegation, a high-ranked U.S. delegation, I mean, the same person that was in the meeting, Juan Gonzalez, which is advisor for Joe Biden for hemispheric affairs, for Latin American issues, basically, he said that the sanctions against Russia were also by design made thinking in also attacking or affecting Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. So that give you a sense of, I mean, come on, you are busy supposedly trying to solve a crisis in Europe, and now you are designing sanctions to affect Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela. That doesn't make sense unless you actually are planning to have this alternative scenario in Latin America to try to, to push towards that. And that's something that drives us crazy here in Venezuela for a few days. And then we had these military navy drills between Colombia and the U.S. and they mentioned that, especially the Colombian Ministry for Defense mentioned that was also in the framework of NATO. I mean, and one starts thinking that in a nuclear submarine was there, which is also something important to say, because I mean, you don't move nuclear, machinery that easy. I mean, if you move nuclear weapons, it's because you want to send a big sign, so a big message. So that those are like facts that somehow make us believe at some point last week that scenario was a possibility. But right now, of course, we are facing this approach from Washington to Caracas that we really don't know what it is. But I believe that we can talk about that later in the discussion.
I just want to ask you, Jesus, to speak more to people here that might not know, because this is something that I have been speaking of with all my programs in Brazil, on how harsh are those sanctions for the common people, for the regular folks in Venezuela, because people sometimes they think that sanctions are something that will not affect people, or they don't know how those sanctions are affecting the regular people. And I think it's important for people to understand how horrible and inhumane those sanctions are to like children and regular citizens of Venezuela.
I mean, sanctions affect us in the capacity of the government to have access to resources, first of all, because the sanctions were especially designed to affect the oil industry, PDVSA, which is the Venezuelan company producing and exporting oil. So they focus all their batteries towards PDVSA mostly. But not only that, they froze Venezuelan accounts abroad. They froze Venezuelan gold in the Bank of England. I mean, we are talking about, according to some figures that I remember, something between 30 and $40 billion in assets and liquid funds seized by the US, Europe, and Japan mostly. So that have a direct impact in a country, especially a country like Venezuela, that have social programs that are very important in taking care of the health of the people, of the housing, health, that kind of programs that we develop in Venezuela to protect the population. So of course that have an immediate direct impact. And some people from the US, these famous economists from the Center for Economic Affairs, I don't remember his name right now, but they made a study about just between 1918 and 2018 and 2019. They calculated like that the effects of the sanctions might have an impact on deaths of more than 40,000 Venezuelans. And also, a few months later after that study, Alfred de Zayas from the United Nations, in one event, he said that he calculated that the effects of the sanctions were rounding the 100,000 lives. So that's to give you an idea of how that affects you. In our ordinary life, immediately after the sanctions were announced, Venezuelans with cars, we had to do like 3 or 5 hours to put gas in our cars. And that affect, and that's to say the easiest part, but that also have an effect in the economy, because most of the transport in Venezuela depends on gas or diesel, and sanctions were also designed to affect that. So that's another part of the problem. The quality of the services, got worse and worse, and that's part of the problem that I have right now with my internet. That somehow explain why my internet right now is bumpy. And things like that. The quality. We had the electric blackout that happened like 2 years ago almost. Already, I believe that we celebrated that yesterday or before yesterday, 2 years of that blackout that put Venezuela without almost the whole country without electricity for like 2 or 3 days. Between 3 and 5 days, depending on the areas. In Caracas, it was for about 3 days, but in other parts of Venezuela, it affected some people for 6 or 7 days until the service was restored. So that's to give you an idea of how we were affected. Hyperinflation. Venezuela has been for decades a country with high inflation, but since 2018 and 2017, when the sanctions began to take shape, and worse in 2019, of course, the hyperinflation figures went crazy. And finally, we just in this December, officially, according to economists, went out of the hyperinflation crisis. And the last number that I believe that we had is like for February, it was like 2.9% of inflation for that month, which is for us amazing, because we had in the worst months of the hyperinflation crisis, like number figures around 200% in 1 month of inflation. So that's to give you an idea of how all these attacks, blockades, sanctions against Venezuela have affected us. And maybe I'm forgetting a lot of more of things, but those are the things that I recall at this moment.
So I wanted to draw attention to the organization, because folks can check them out. I think they do really good work. And so it's the Center for Economic and Policy Research. That's
exactly.
the name escaped you at the time, but they do really, really good work. They have great economists there who've done a
Yes.
lot of work, extensive work on.
Sachs, Jeffrey
on
Sachs is the guy.
I'm sorry.
Jeffrey Sachs is the guy that led the investigation.
Yeah, and Mark Weisbrot has written a lot about Venezuela, and so folks can check
Hmm.
their work out. They're at cepr.net. So one more thing before we get on to the next topics. You folks covered a lot there. We talked about again the President Duque visiting the White House. The timing of it, not that you and I had a lot of off air conversations about it. The timing of it was curious. If Washington had any respect for our people, any respect whatsoever, they would not be inviting Duque, a lame duck president, on an election year to the White House with this backdrop. I mean, it doesn't make any logical sense. If he had some, again, if his advisors cared at all about our people, they would say, let's wait until after the elections. So right before that, not too long before that, I believe Jesus, you mentioned, or it might have been nothing, the U.S. Colombia, U.S. and NATO carrying out the naval drills near Venezuela. Then you have Duque going to the White House, pretty much kissing, the imperialists, and pretty much saying, yes, we'll do whatever you want us to do. We'll vote your way at the UN. We'll make sure that whatever you guys want at the UN, we'll give it to you. And then Colombia, which was already the lone NATO partner in the region, in the the entire region. Which doesn't make any sense because NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. There's nothing North or Atlantic about Colombia or anything in Latin America. Like NATO has no business being in Latin America. But they were the lone partner, and then Biden goes and again, almost like more of a slap in the face to Latin America and says, "We're going to give you this special designation." I looked up. I went to the if you can give me a second here. I looked up what the special designation basically offers. If I can give me a second here.
Trade benefits, things like that, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah, I don't. I seem to have lost it here, and that's okay. But so that happened, and then Maduro also. Jesus, before we move on, can you just quickly talk about? Maduro spoke about this possible new World War III, and then Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil, had some headlines when she said the war in Ukraine paves the way for a multipolar world. And not that you and I had some interesting conversations about that, but you had a former Brazilian president talking about, look, this war may pave a way for a new multipolar world. That multipolar term has been being used a lot, by former non-aligned countries and third world countries. And then Maduro says, look, this can get a little out of hand. We're possibly seeing, the beginning of a World War III. Can you folks speak about that? Speak to that.
I would say that yes. I mean, Maduro talking about the possibility of a World War III after those meetings with the White House, but I believe that doesn't have anything to do with that meeting. I believe that's part of the analysis with the things that we have been talking about, with the possibilities of opening of the crisis in Ukraine, getting more expanded throughout Europe, and the possibility of that crisis reaching Latin America in the scenarios that we talk about, and the possibility of also that the war might be also, used as an excuse to hit the conflict between Taiwan and China. So those are real scenarios that are there, and sometimes the war machine of the U.S. and Europe, they don't really care about what the lives of people means. I mean, they just want to move on with their need of produce and sell more weapons, more whatever. I mean, to promote war. So in that sense, I believe that the scenario of a World War III is possible, of course, and also, but also that goes like in parallel, but not directly connected with the reality of having a multipolar war, which is the reason also for what is happening right now in Ukraine. I mean, I believe that what is happening right now in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, is a response to the US and Europe realizing that they are not anymore the most important players in the world, or the only players in the world, and they are seeing that China and Russia are taking an important place in the world, discussion. So the conflict, yes, make it, in my opinion, clearer. I mean, it's easier to see those like three big, you know, uh, axis in the war scenario right now. And also, but also the US sanctions against Russia, in my own humble opinion, are going to exacerbate that multipolarity, because it's gonna force Russia, China, and other countries that has been sanctioned to find alternatives to get rid of the dependency of the dollar or the SWIFT system, or and in that sense, I believe that is important. What you just mentioned. I don't know what you think about that, Natalia.
Regarding what Zilma said, and the interviews that she's been doing in Brazil about the issue with the war are master classes. I wish everybody could like speak Portuguese to understand, because they are like really really great, especially for people from the global south to understand the perspective of what she's coming from, especially talking about neutrality, but also remembering that Ukraine, same as Brazil when she was in power, was a victim of a hybrid warfare that has been fomented by, at the time, Barack Obama's government. So let's all remember that Ukraine went through the Euromaidan, the popular insurrection of like people trying to westernize Ukraine and like going against what they said it was like a pro-Russian government, and wanting to be closer to the European Union and closer to Western values, and like rejecting what they perceived as Russian culture. And Brazil was going through a process of people trying to bash PT, the Workers' Party, sorry, but bash PT as a party that was corrupt, as a party that was like hurting people, and it was actually the opposite. Like they were like fomenting many of the propaganda that was being fomented against Dilma was coming from the Western media, was coming from the United States and the European media. And now we have like evidence that the Brazilian justice system was working with people from the United States. And this was all about the time when we know, thanks to many like archives from WikiLeaks and like stuff like that, that they have been planning, that the United States have been planning for a while, like to take over again, to try to shut down all the dissident voices from the global south. So Dilma made a very important point regarding of like understanding that both moments, even though we were like different, but they were like fomented by the same agents, that was the United States. And in her case, she lost the presidency. Brazil ascend to a far-right government. We have now several economical crises. We have now several like social crises regarding the rise of like fascism, the rise of like Nazi movements in Brazil, the same that has happened in Ukraine. So even though situations and culture and geographical locations are completely different, many similarities of what the outcome of the coup brought. And Dilma was just saying that we need a multipolar world, basically for like the model of a unipolar world with the United States dictating all orders is causing the issues we are facing now, and not just like global issues, because like people are taking the issue in Ukraine globally, but also like regional issues, especially us from Latin America. Like our entire history is made like colonization, and after the colonization, the U.S. and the European imperialism always like fomenting coups and military dictatorships and like overthrowing our, especially our popular socialist governments. And we have been accepting this, and we have been like going through this, and now it's a time for a change. It's a time to challenge the United States view on their hegemony, basically.
Well said. Absolutely. So I had some images there for the audience while you folks were speaking. There's a great piece in the Guardian of all places, by someone by the name of David Adler, who's part of Progressive International. While we could be critical of Progressive International, we thought this piece was excellent. It's called "The West versus Russia: Why the Global South Isn't Taking Sides." My favorite quote from that piece was AMLO, the president of Mexico, who pretty much said like, that war over there in Europe has nothing to do with our people. That don't get us involved in your nonsense over there. That has nothing to do with. In other words, he's sending a clear signal like we want to do business with everybody. Like, don't get us involved. And so while we did pose this as a potential third world, which I think, again, if I'm hearing you folks correctly, it's a sort of a Washington trying to dictate once again, which side are you on? You saw, Duque go to Washington. You saw, headlines of the United States trying to curry favor with other Latin American presidents to try to get them to go their way. But at the same time, you're seeing these Latin American leaders, even someone like Bolsonaro, Nati, the president of Brazil, who also said, we're not going to, we don't want to. It was a weird response. Go ahead. I see you want to say something.
Yeah, basically, regarding why Bolsonaro is so adamant on like try to stay neutral. So far, I think it's more his personal opinion. But if you look at the diplomatic movements that Brazil is doing regarding Russia, they have been voting against Russia in the UN. They have voted against Russia, and several times they are not pro-sanctioning Russia. This is something Bolsonaro said he won't do it. But Bolsonaro is using the opportunity for something that is extremely important and extremely problematic, that, of course, the media now won't care. They were not caring before, now even less. That he's saying, well, now Russia has been, and Belarus has been sanctioned. So we're gonna need the fertilizers they import coming from somewhere, and the only place we can get those chemicals from the fertilizer are from like mining within indigenous lands. And in Brazil, it's illegal to mine, to make like mining activities within indigenous lands. And now Bolsonaro has been pushing for a vote in the Congress and the Senate House to be like a express vote to actually allow that not just like mining for like the chemicals used on fertilizers, but also like for hydrocarbonates, for like sources of energy. So basically they will destroy indigenous lands. They will, of course, put all the populations there in mortal dangers, not just for exposing them to like dangerous chemicals and destroying the environment, but also like putting them in direct confrontation with mining companies who have a history of committing genocide against those communities. And apparently, Bolsonaro doesn't even need those chemicals because Brazil has a stock for the fertilizers and specific for many months on. So, even though like Brazil is biggest producer of like food, etc., within South America, they have enough to try to find other sources, or is without having to commit more genocide, because he has been committing genocide against indigenous people. And now who's gonna like I'm sorry, but we have to be honest, who's had to be blamed for everything? Like are those people who have like those indigenous communities who are putting their lives possibly in danger, possibly communities will cease to exist because of that movement, because of something that is happening in Europe. And who's going to be to be blamed by this? I know Bolsonaro. We
Putin
have been one.
for CNN.
I know Bolsonaro has been wanting this for a while, pushing this for a while. One of the reasons of why he has been trying to keep a low profile on Russia, he even like mocked a phone call with Vladimir Putin to say, well, I'm talking to Putin, and things there, the media is exaggerating of the issues there. But we have to be honest, they are using something that people will the international community that before might even say something, but now they will say, well, we understand, because they can also benefit from it. One of the main reasons of why many, even like a right-wing government like Ecuador, has been trying to remain neutral and everything that is going on, is basically because of the fertilizers that they have like to buy from Russia. And Bolsonaro will use the situation as an excuse to destroy those communities, to destroy even more the Brazilian environment. And it's fine, because it's the moment we all have sacrifice to make. And this is something that I know this will be the excuse that the international community will use when, if something, of course, they are fighting in Brazil viciously against it. We have like all the leftist parties, we have like all the social movements, the indigenous movements, but still their decisions is not with them. It's out of their hands. And if something like this is allowed, it will be the death sentence for so many people. But of course, the international community won't care, because this has been the history of Latin America, and no one talks about the amount of like pain, suffering, and especially the genocide of thousands of communities that have vanished because of the greed of the capital.
I'm surprised about. I just want to add that I was surprised. I was digging into the voting against Russia in the United Nations, and Salvador was one of the countries that abstained in that vote. And I just want to mention that because that's something that amazed me, that I haven't dig too much on the causes of that decision. But anyway, I wanted to share it with you because
It's not for
only in
altruistic reasons. I will say that.
exactly, I don't know the
Right.
reasons for that, but the only countries beside El Salvador that abstain in that very negative vote against Russia in United Nations just a few days after the operation started was where uh, Bolivia, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela did not vote because sanctions do not allow us to pay our dues in the United Nations. But I believe that we were also going to be among the countries that abstained. But El Salvador is something that amazed me. I just want to
But
share it with you.
just it's important again. The UN vote, this vote in specific was not like they were like condemning Russia, but they were not like asking for sanctions, and that's why Brazil voted for. For example, the Organization of the American States, they draw a motion for it, and in their motion they had the possibility of like putting sanctions on Russia or like making countries, and Brazil did not sign. Venezuela signed through Guaido.
Of course,
Which was
the
like
Guaido
extremely funny.
delegation in the OA, yes, yes.
It was like extremely funny, but anyway, like we are not seeing this in Latin. We're not seeing this in the global South in general. Like we. That's why I keep always saying that there is a need. I know they are still active, but there is a need that we have to strengthen more the non-aligned movement, because we are gonna suffer. Maduro has been making some great speeches about how the cost of life is rising, especially for countries in the global South, for people who cannot even afford what they are having now, and a rise of the costs will be the death sentence of so many. And now we cannot even.
Pardon me, Nati. So let's transition now to Venezuela, because Venezuela was in the news heavy this previous week. So Jesus, you're in Caracas. You know, your news outlet, Orinoco Tribune, and folks, please should check them out, orinocotribune.com. You know, but you're in Caracas. So let's go over what took place. It took a lot of people by surprise. Can you let's talk about the events that unfolded and what both of your analysis is, and what do you think may come out of this?
About Ukraine or about the gringos coming to pedir cacao, as
La
we
segunda
say?
parte, la segunda parte, Jesús. La segunda parte.
So yes, okay. One thing that I wanted to say before getting into there to Natalia is that I'm surprised about what you say on Bolsonaro's position on Russia because of personal issues. It makes a lot of sense, but I initially saw that it was just because of trade, you know. But I understand the point. And I also wanted to mention about that whole issue that one of the statements that I read that I like the most is the one from Cuba. Cuba statements about Ukraine, the official statement where the conflict began, was very similar to most of the progressive countries in the region, but they use a nice, phrase saying the Russians, the Russians have the right to defend themselves. And that's one of the quotes that I highlighted the most about the Cuban statement, because I believe that that's part of the analysis that people have to do in relation to that. Now going to the gringos pidiendo cacao here in Caracas, we were caught by surprise. Allegedly, actually, we in Orinoco Tribune, a few hours after the news were released by Associated Press, by the New York Times, a lot of people here were like, come on, this news piece without names, without this might be another fake news from the New York Times or any mainstream media, trying to break the relations between Russia and Venezuela, whatever, trying to distract attention. I don't know. So a lot of people, even some media outlets here in Venezuela, say that might be another fake news. But the day after that, of course, President Maduro at night confirmed the information about this meeting that happened like 10 days ago, I believe, here in Caracas between Juan Gonzalez and one high-ranked U.S. official in charge, I forget his name, in charge of what they call U.S. Prisoners or whatever. And there was a lot of speculation about what was discussed there. And President Maduro, when he announced that the meeting actually took place, he said that that a lot of what you are reading in Reuters or Associated Press are just speculations and are very far away from what actually what was discussed in the meeting. But we know at this point that Venezuela released two what the gringos call prisoners. I mean, one of them was among what the media also called the Citgo Six, and they called them like U.S. citizens kidnapped by the tropical dictatorship of Nicolas Maduro and whatever. But in reality, those guys, first of all, are Venezuelans. I mean, I try to highlight that a lot, and we try to make it clear that they are not gringos. I mean, they are Venezuelans that happen to get naturalized U.S. citizens while working for Citgo in the U.S. Crazy.
5 of them, right? I think 5 of them
Yes,
were citizens, and one of them is a
exactly. Five of
permanent
them are
resident in the
citizen,
U.S.
and the other one have just a green card. So basically, I mean, those guys. I don't know what information they have, but I'm pretty sure that there is something very important, behind what these guys did for the U.S. while working for Citgo in the U.S., because it's incredible the amount of pressure put by the Trump administration first and now by Biden administration to have those guys out of jail. And they were put out of jail here because they were negotiating a loan without authorization from Caracas, putting almost most of the shares of Citgo as collaterals, like risking the whole company without authorization from Caracas. And they were brought to Caracas. They told them that it was a board meeting or whatever, and in reality it was a trap, and they were caught and immediately put to jail, and the legal procedure began, and a few years later they were sentenced for embezzlement and association and corruption, and basically they are not political activists. I mean, what I'm trying to tell you is that, I mean, those guys do not have anything to do with politics. But anyway, I mean, one of those guys, Gustavo Cárdenas, was released a few days ago, and another U.S. naturalized U.S. citizens, Cuban American, as they call it, Cuban gringo, I would say, that was caught flying a drone near the border between Venezuela and Colombia a couple of years ago. That guy was also in jail because he was accused of espionage, because he was flying that drone near the border areas with Colombia. That is the other guy that was released from prison. So that says that Venezuela sent a message of willingness to, keep conversations with the U.S. But it's important to highlight that the gringos were the one that have to come to Miraflores Palace, where, President Maduro works. And that's very important because it's a sign that they wouldn't say it, but it's a sign of recognition of President Maduro as the one in charge in Venezuela. And what else I can tell you? I believe that a lot of things might happen in relation to that. I was mentioning to you before of the cameras that I was listening to a radio interview to a Venezuelan expert a couple of hours ago, and he said that because a lot of people says that the main issue of the negotiations is that the gringos need Venezuelan oil, and because of the conflict with Russia and the sanctions against Russia, and that this Venezuelan expert that I respect a lot is a long-standing oil expert in Venezuela. He said, "Listen, and I mean, the only country, Venezuela is not capable to produce enough oil to. That's what he said. I mean, not enough from what the U.S. is needing right now." But he also said that Colombia, that is also saying that Colombia is announcing that they can also provide the U.S. market with oil. He said that the Colombians do not have enough capacity to produce oil to do that. And also, he mentioned that the only country in the region that is capable to satisfy the whole that Russia's oil is causing in the U.S. economy because of the sanctions is Canada, that have a 1.5 million barrels per day capacity to produce oil like this, he said. So, analyzing that, what he also tried to say is that he believed that the real motive of the gringos coming here to Venezuela was not oil. I mean, that might have been used as an excuse, but he believed that that's just an attempt from the White House to take advantage of the situation to try to reapproach the Venezuelan, reality, the Venezuelan, conflict, or whatever you want to call it. So that's basically my take. Of course, that surprised us. A lot of people from the right, they are, saying, they are like crazy, saying that how could this be possible? I mean, the Venezuelan right, because they depend on the money that the gringos send them to keep, sabotaging Venezuela. But also some people, but not too many here in Venezuela from the left, they are happy because they say, listen, I told you, Maduro is a capitalist guy. So he's, negotiating with the gringos. So you never have everyone happy, but that's part of the discussion. But I can tell you that from my perspective as a regular, ordinary Chavista, that most of Venezuelans are happy that those negotiations are happening. And let's see what happens.
I just want to add to this that when the White House spokeswoman said that they were going to negotiate the welfare of North American citizens imprisoned in Venezuela, for a while I was thinking that she was talking about the mercenaries that have been hired by Guaido and Maduro to kidnap Maduro during Trump's presidency, and they had the whole team involving like
you mean Operation, what was it, Operation Gideon, the Rambo,
yes.
the Hollywood Rambo.
Yes. And I was like, are they gonna talk with them? Are they talking about the mercenaries? Because I wasn't aware. And it's interesting also when we are talking about like, they are saying that no, we are not like exploring the opportunity of the possibility of like making deals with Venezuela. But it's important to highlight that they did break a deal with Brazil regarding Petrobras. Brazil has a huge amount of oil that is in a very deep in the ocean, the pre-salt. And it has been this was a huge project during the Workers' Party government, and it has been sabotaged since the coup and etc. But Petrobras have been completely broke down by Bolsonaro government, and but the United States asked Brazil to rise the volume of oil that they have been producing. And it's important also that many Arab countries from the Middle East were like not kind of like willing to attend the United States demands. So that's why I'm talking again how dangerous it is, this rhetoric of saying it's okay that our prices will rise, that the cost of living will rise because we are like paying against to fight Russia. And it's not. It's actually a power play that countries are doing.
And there's also a lot of, public relations and media distortions here and there, trying to drive people crazy about. But one of the things that I read is what you say, Natalia, about the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia rejecting the call from Biden because they didn't want to accept the call of Biden asking for more oil because they wanted the U.S. to be more committed to the Yemen war. And I was like, wow, how, more committed than what they already are. I mean, those guys are basically providing weapons and bombs that Saudi Arabia is dropping on Yemen every single day. So anyway, I just wanted to share that because it's true, that situation about some Arab countries not wanting to increase or using it as a leverage, to try to put pressure on the U.S. administration also.
So we're about we're at the 55-minute mark. So I'm just going to quickly add, if it is true that this is just sort of a way to possibly reset with Maduro, I mean, there is a lot there that Washington, if they work in good faith, that this could be potentially, and again, we know who we're dealing with in Washington, but Washington kidnapped Alex Saab. You have the Sitco six. You have two of them that got freed. You have, I believe, there's three other. I believe it's two or three other. Yeah, three other. You got the one Marine, Matthew Heath, American Marine, who's in jail for terrorism and arms trafficking. And you have two Green Beret Special Forces from that. I'm going to call it the Rambo mission from 2020. Folks should look that up. Look up Operation Gideon. It was when I read it, I had to read it. I keep saying this. I had to read it like 2 or 3
Venezuelan leader Bay of Pigs.
I'm sorry?
Venezuelan leader Bay of Pigs.
It was the sloppiest thing. It was so. I read it first from Joshua Goodman from the Associated. I believe he's with the Associated Press.
Yes,
and I read it, and I had to read it like 2 or 3 times, and I just kept laughing more and more every time I kept reading it because it was so sloppy. But anyways, but there could be a potential reset there. So I'm hoping some good things come out of that. We have about 4 minutes left. Can we just quickly talk about? We had elections in Colombia. If within 30 seconds, 60 seconds. What that could mean, and also yesterday in Chile, Gabriel Boric got sworn in. He's 36 years old. He's a self-described.
The caviar left.
Yeah, Jesus, I know you love him, and folks should check out what Jesus wrote about. And again, we're, not that you and I have had conversations about this a lot off air. I'm happy for the Chileans. I really am.
Yes,
that being said. Go read what Jesus wrote about him in Orinoco Tribune, and go read what Salvador Allende's son. You have to go an open letter to Gabriel. What's his name?
He was the grandson of Allende.
The grandson.
I don't remember his name. Pablo Sepúlveda. Yes.
It's in Spanish. I'm pretty sure you can Google translate it. But
we put it in English. I mean, you can find it.
Go read what Jesus said about him, and go read also the Salvador Allende's grandson. With the open letter. I think it's important to be critical at the same time respecting the sovereignty of Chile and respecting that process there in Chile.
And the differences. I mean, I'm critic of course of Boric, and I believe that Petro is very similar to Boric in the progressive approach. But of course, as a Venezuelan, even though I'm critical of them, I'm happy because having at least liberal presidents in the region, which that's why I believe they are. Is better than having right-wingers. So in any case, I believe that having Boric in Chile and the possibility of Petro winning in Colombia are good signs. And just going to the Colombian elections, I'm happy. I mean, Petro got more than 4 million votes. I believe that it doubled the votes of the other primaries a candidate from the other parties that happened yesterday. And also, it's important to analyze that he's going to have a very complicated Congress scenario, because according to the numbers that I've been seeing, the Pacto Histórico, which is the party from Petro, only got like 10% of the deputies, and like anyway, I mean they are the biggest majority in the deputy in the House, and they, I believe, are the second most important minority in the deputies House. But I believe that there's a space, according to the numbers that I saw a few minutes ago, for negotiations in order for them with the liberal parties and the party of the U from Juan Manuel Santos. Maybe they can reach some majority in some. They are going to have to build some sort of coalition. But Petro, if he wins, he's going to have a scenario similar to the one from Pedro Castillo, if you ask me. But I believe that less dramatic. I mean, because of what happening against Pedro Castillo right now is crazy.
Yeah, and just real quick, not the pardon me, this is just from a few hours ago. Here's a piece from Reuters. Peru Congress votes to begin impeachment of Castillo as second attempt. So the oligarchs there, the bourgeoisie, and they're relentless. And I said this off air. I'm going to say it here. I think he needs to stop. He needs to stick up for himself at this point, and he needs to just stop conceding and let the chips fall where they may, even if that means they get rid of him. Because we saw what happened with Manuel Zelaya. What was in 2007, 2009. My memory doesn't serve me right now. But these things happen. There's a process. This is Peru. This 11. Is the first time they've ever elected anything like Pedro Castillo, right? And so clearly they don't want him in power. It's obvious that they don't want him in power. So I think he needs to stick to his guns and let the chips fall where they may. But Nati, go ahead and respond to what Jesus just said, and then we'll end it there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that regarding Colombia and also Peru is extremely complicated, and you need to have some sort of like a political finesse to conciliate when you have like extremely fragmented Congress, which was something that, of course, Lula was someone that wasn't had a extensive political experience. So he was able to, even though the Congress in Brazil was extremely fragmented, it's still able to make like important changes. So yes, it's important to stick up from himself. Pedro Castillo started with a wonderful cabinet, but instead of like going towards his party, going towards like the base of like the activists from the people who elected him, he started to listen the other members of like the coalition. He started to listen the media too much. He went through the criticisms of trying to make a more palatable government. But something that people sometimes fail to understand is that a government that is openly a leftist, a government that is clearly indigenous government like the one in Peru, will never be palatable through the media, through the Western or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you have to always listen for those who elected you, for those who made a promise. His governmental program was actually really great, but so far he hasn't been able to do anything because he has he keeps shifting cabinets. He keep like firing ministers, or
this is his fourth cabinet now.
Yeah. Yes. And the first one was actually like I said was really great, and because of like stupid criticisms were like not even like untrue regarding like his chancellor and also the chief of cabinet of like taking things out of context of like regarding of what they have said in the past. I know Peru has a problematic history with the left, with the whole thing with the shining path, Sendero Luminoso, but for those who speak Spanish. But still, he was someone that had so many. He was someone that actually made the world, especially like the Western progressives, excited for like the Peruvian politics for a while. And now everything went downhill. And I think Petro is someone that has more experience, political experience. He's someone that, even though he's very progressive, he's someone that came from the guerrillas. He's someone that is willing to dialogue with the ongoing, with the actual active guerrillas in Colombia right now. And I believe, and this is something that I'm not saying for myself, but actually from the liberal media, from the liberal Western media, that he won't be someone that will have such a palatable opinion of the United States interference in the Colombian politics. And this is something that, even though he has a very critical position towards Venezuela, towards Nicaragua, I don't know regarding Cuba, but he has a very harsh position on those countries. I do believe that because of his own stance on how the United States will be able to act in Colombia, this will, of course, an effect. It will be positive for, especially for Venezuela, because he won't accept all the interferences that the United States keep doing in Colombia. And just to finish very quickly, one of the reasons, official reason on why Duque wants to visit Biden now was to celebrate the 2,000 years of like partnership of Colombia and the United States. So
Yeah. And speaking about that 200-year history, so Carlos Cruz Mosquera, Anticonquista editor, he has a new pieces coming out. I'm privy to some of it here. Colombia's left makes significant inroad to power in historic elections. So obviously, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It'll be on our website soon. So this Gustavo Petro's Pacto Histórico, it does consist of it's a coalition that consists of communists, socialists, social democrats, liberals, and historically oppressed communities. And he's describing it now as the most dominant political force in the country, albeit that we have to understand, like Jesus said, it's going to be complicated because the legislator is going to be, it's going to be a mix of a bunch of different parties and coalitions, and it's not going to be easy to govern. And if this is any indication, it looks like he will be the next president of Colombia, which is very exciting because in 200 years, the 200-year history of Colombia, they've never had, again, anything like a Gustavo Petro. And so that, again, to your point, Nati,
let me interrupt you for a second. Sorry, just a second. I forgot to mention that a lot of people here in Venezuela talk about that right now is one of the most dramatic moments for this to safeguard Petro, because it's very common in Colombian politics to kill, especially progressive candidates are about to win. So there's, I mean, that discussion is happening a lot here, in the talking shows in Venezuela. So I just wanted to add that.
No, absolutely.
Because we have to be aware of that.
Absolutely.
It's just another thing about Colombia, which is very weird, is that nowadays Colombia had Ernesto Samper as its president and he was at the time a liberal, and nowadays he has a much more pro-Latin America approach. He's a member of the Grupo de Puebla. He's a member of like Foro de São Paulo, and he's doing a bunch of things of integration of Latin America. And now, after being the president of Colombia, he understands how hurtful and horrible the interference of United States in Colombia is for Colombians and for the rest of Latin America. So I think that if you had the opportunity to read and watch his presentations, because he's always making conversatorios or whatever, he says a lot of things regarding political violence and how this is particularly problematic for Latin America regarding the imperial acts on political violence, because this political violence in Colombia is not coming from Colombia. The orders are not coming from Colombianos. This is coming from abroad. The same as you have to understand that most of the political crimes, killings of people in Latin America, historical killings or attempts of killings, like the one against recently President Evo Morales, when he was leaving Bolivia after the coup, and he said that his plane has been attacked. This was not coming from the golpista sector. This was coming from people who were like making sure the golpista sector was in power. That this is coming from abroad. This is coming from those who are never want to see Latin America thrive and los gringos, yes.
The gringos again.
The gringos again.
You know, we laugh, but this is there's a reason why we do this. There's a reason, Jesus, why you do this. Nati, there's a reason why you do this. This is such, you know, one, obviously we care about our people. We care about Latin America and the Caribbean. But this is really, truly an exciting, I'm going to keep saying this, that there's a revolution happening in Latin America. And people need to pay attention because this is an exciting time. We're living through a period of historic proportions. I mean, this is something that, you know, when we're all dead and gone, you know, people are going to be writing about this era, you know, probably starting with you know, with Hugo Chavez, you know, in 98, right? And then just what happened after that, the first pink, I hate the pink tide, but whatever, let's call it the pink tide. And then that, it took a few steps back, and we got a little scary for a while, right? You know, and now it's back, and it's not that it's back, it's just not going to stop. It's like a I hate to use the term virus because it has a pejorative, but it's for the gringos, it is a virus that they're not going to be able to stop, and they're not going to be able to contain, right? So we're at the 70-minute mark. I think we're going to leave it there. There was a lot to cover. You know, we're going to try to be here every single week. You know, we didn't forget about Argentina, IMF. We understand the significance of what happened in Colombia with the elections. We understand the significance of Boric. We didn't even talk about Honduras and Zelaya. So there's so much going on all over Latin America, all over the Caribbean. This is an election year for Brazil as well. So we're going to need some analysis in the future from Natalia. I would be remiss, Natalia, if you could just mention that this is the 4-year anniversary of the assassination of a councilwoman in Brazil, Marielle Franco.
Yes, Marielle Franco was a councilwoman from the Socialist and Liberty Party. She was a Black woman from the favelas in Rio de Janeiro. She was someone that had a background in popular social movements, and she was using her voice and her power in institutional politics to denounce the violence of the police against Black communities, the class struggle in Rio de Janeiro, and racism, violence against women. And she was brutally murdered after leaving a political event in Rio de Janeiro 4 years ago. And one of the things that many people don't talk about is that so far the investigation is an ongoing investigation. The whole process is completely messed up because they have stepped on a very important barrier, that is the people who have been implicated to be part of her murder were people who were neighbors with Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, before Bolsonaro was the president, when he was just a congressman from Rio de Janeiro. And since then, the investigation had so many ups and downs, and the family, the party, and of course all the Brazilian people are still waiting to hear. And it was not just Marielle, her driver, Anderson Silva, was also murdered as well. One of her PR teams was with her, but she survived. But Marielle was someone that was extremely important, and she marks a very a specific moment of Brazilian politics. That was when we knew that the fascists were in power, the fascists are coming from us, and things that we're very unfamiliar in modern ages in Brazil, that is like political violence, are coming back. And Marielle was not the only one. We also had like other politically motivated crimes against people who are activists from parties, who are like social movement activists, and this is and she like she became kind of like a martyr for everybody that was against Bolsonaro, because she stand personally against one of his sons in Rio de Janeiro. She marked a very important moment of not just the rise of fascism, but also the rise of like the willing of the left in Brazil to do something and actually like take the calls to the streets and like fight for our lives, but also like for the opportunity and the to be in power, because Marielle gave so many, like people like in Brazil like to say, she led us with so many seeds, with like people, especially Black women in Brazil, started to get interested in going through politics and like continue her work of like denouncing the racist police, the atrocities that are being committed in the inner cities in Brazil as well. So I would like to everybody to remember her, because she was amazing, and her legacy is still with us, but we still are aware in Brazil that there's not enough justice in the capitalist systems that will make us compensate for what we lost when she died.
Absolutely. So we're gonna end it there, folks. That's Natalia Orban. She's an independent journalist. She has some 30,000 plus followers on Twitter, but she could always use a few more. So please follow her on Twitter. We were also joined by Jesus Rodriguez Espinosa from Orinoco Tribune. Please, I believe they're in the middle of a fundraiser drive, if I'm not mistaken, and so they could also use some help. Please support independent journalism. And also, if you have some additional coin, also think about supporting ANTICONQUISTA, where
of course,
almost 100% of our funds goes. We pay it forward, and we use it as revolutionary mutual aid to give to different groups and organizations in Latin America and the Caribbean. A little bit, just to be truthful, goes to some of the overhead to pay for platforms like this, but none of it goes into our pockets. And so we will be here every single week. Again, thank you to the good folks over at Orinoco Tribune for collaborating with us. So Nuestra America is now part of a program being hosted by, if you will, or sponsored by ANTICONQUISTA and Orinoco Tribune. So until next time, folks, we'll see you next week. Put a fist up.